Before you watch this, listen up. If you do not want to know what is going to happen in the Season 2 finale of Amphibia, True Colors, do not watch this video. Also, direct your frustration at the Disney Corporation for delaying a perfectly good and finished episode for weeks for no adequately explained reason. Even Matt Brawley, the showrunner, said that the reasons for the episode being delayed were ridiculous. This is Disney's fault more than anyone's. Alright, let's go. Anne has grown from being a carefree and somewhat lazy person at the start of Amphibia into an intelligent and hardworking citizen. She really cares for those around her, and she always tries to do her best to make the lives of everyone around her better. But none of this was enough to make True Colors, the Season 2 finale of Amphibia, a good episode for her. Anne suffers a cascade of defeats throughout this episode. Many of these are due to forces that are entirely out of her control, but some of them are things she could have prevented had she a little more foresight and empathy. Anne is our protagonist, and she's a good protagonist, so it's easy for a lot of us, the viewers, to excuse her faults, especially considering the extent of horrible things that happened to her. She ends Season 2 of Amphibia in Los Angeles, California. She goes through the portal alone with the Plantars. They awake in a world that is completely alien for the Plantars, and is even quite weird for Anne, especially considering she's been gone for months. Anne has just watched one of her best friends die before her eyes, before being sucked into a portal that's taken her back to Earth, which, at least the going back to Earth part, is something she has wanted since she landed in Amphibia in the first place, but she was not planning on going home with the Plantars. I mean, how is she supposed to explain these large frogs who are sentient to a bunch of random Earthlings like ourselves? She will have to explain to her parents why exactly she is associating with these giant frogs, and, perhaps most heartbreakingly, she will have to try and explain to Marcy's parents what happened to their daughter. I don't know what will happen to Anne in Season 3 exactly, but I do believe it will involve her returning to Amphibia and trying to resurrect Marcy. Considering the level of stress she's under and the level of trauma she has endured, it's tempting to overlook or at least downplay her faults, but these faults are still there. Let's start with Marcy. Ever since we see the two of them reunite in Marcy at the Gates, it doesn't really seem like Anne is particularly aware of Marcy's feelings. Now, to a certain extent, this is not Anne's fault, because Marcy is very hesitant to reveal her true feelings, but Anne seems oblivious to her in a lot of ways, especially during the episode today at the aquarium. It clearly hurts Marcy to let Anne go and have her go back with the Plantars, and Anne does not seem to realize this. She sees this as choosing between responsibility and what she actually wants, which is to go back with the Plantars, instead of having to choose between her best friend, whom she's known for a long time, and the frog family she met a few months ago. I'm not sure it's quite accurate to say that Anne is choosing the Plantars over Marcy, but, literally that's what she's doing. Even if, emotionally, we might sympathize with Anne in this situation. And Anne never really considers how this decision might affect Marcy, how it might leave her vulnerable to being manipulated by shadowy forces beyond both their control, which is exactly what happens. If Anne does not leave, Marcy is not as vulnerable to getting manipulated by Andreas. In fact, Anne hardly ever considers that maybe Marcy has a different objective than she does. Maybe Marcy has a different perspective on Amphibia. Anne never really looks at things from Marcy's perspective, and this has consequences. Think about the moment near the start of True Colors. Marcy casually brings up, maybe it wouldn't be such a bad thing to stay in Amphibia, and Anne just dismisses this and makes nothing of it. She does not contemplate that, maybe there's a reason Marcy's bringing this up right now. Maybe she actually is a bit hesitant about returning home, and maybe I should talk to her. None of this is anything Anne considers. If she had taken Marcy's perspective more seriously, part of the heartbreak of True Colors could have perhaps been avoided. Anne is the heart of the group. Literally, she is the heart. As opposed to Marcy the wit and Sasha, who is strength. Anne, of all people, should be more attuned to the feelings of her friends. And this goes also for her relationship with Sasha in True Colors. While I give Anne a lot of credit for realizing that Sasha is on her side by the end of this episode, this comes after Anne just unleashes this kind of brutal string of vitriol at Sasha, which I will admit is not undeserved. Sasha has been terrible to her in the past, but in this specific situation, Sasha is not really betraying her. That's not how Sasha sees it. Sasha just sees it as, oh yeah, I'm just going to take over the kingdom with the rebellion. I've been going this way for most of the season, and I owe this to Grime and the Toads, but after we get the new regime settled, maybe I'll go back. Completely reasonable perspective, although, again, from Anne's perspective, you can understand why she does feel so betrayed, but even considering that, Anne allowing these feelings of betrayal to cloud her judgment and not see or even entertain the possibility that Sasha might be telling the truth about Andreas in the middle of the episode, that's not good for Anne or Marcy or Sasha. It's not good for any of them. What was Sasha supposed to do exactly? She can't abandon the rebellion. She's too invested in it now. She'd be letting her Toad friends down, especially Grime. She tries her best to honor Anne's wishes, building off her personal growth we've seen in the dinner and the Battle of the Bands. She wants to send Anne home, and she gives Anne that choice. You can either stay in Amphibia with me and help build this regime, or you can go home. No hard feelings. And even when Anne gets very angry at her, Sasha still wants to do right by Anne. She still wants to send Anne home, even though she's a bit meaner about it. It is also true that even before the characters realize how evil Andreas is, they still have enough information to realize that he's not a great king. Sasha and the Toad Rebellion might not be deposing him for moral reasons, but it's also not completely immoral. At worst, it's a lateral move. Andreas out, the Toads in. The Newts and Andreas sit atop a rigid hierarchy that even Marcy realizes has a lot of problems. Sasha challenging that hierarchy is not wrong in of itself, even though it does go against what she's been saying to Anne in the last couple episodes. If Anne had been willing to at least see things from Sasha's perspective, even if she's still angry at Sasha, she might have been able to stop the world from being doomed. Now, I don't say any of this to attack Anne. I like Anne. She's a great character. But she is flawed. Not as flawed as she was at the beginning of the series, but she still has some personal faults. Anne has a lot to think about. I don't want her to wallow in her anxiety and her suffering. This isn't Evangelion, and I don't want it to be. But it would be good to see Anne continue to grow as a person. I'm interested to see what happens to her next. When she does return to Amphibia sometime in Season 3, and I do believe she will return, it would be really nice to have some cathartic heart-to-heart moments between her and Marcy, assuming that Marcy is going to be revived at some point in Season 3. I want Marcy to not defend herself necessarily, but kind of explain why she's never really been able to say any of these things to Anne. And I want Anne to kind of recognize that maybe she should have tried a little harder to put herself in Marcy's perspective and see things from that viewpoint. Season 2 was very tense and exciting because everyone was hiding something from everyone else. There were secrets everywhere. It was thrilling and dramatic. Season 3 might not have that because our 3 characters know everyone's secret. They're not hiding anything from each other anymore. But even though it might not be as thrilling with all these plot twists, it could be better and more emotional because now that these 3 know a lot about each other, and again, I'm assuming here that Marcy is going to get revived, they can have some real heart-to-heart conversations. They can really connect with each other in a way that they really were not able to before, or even in a way that they were not able to connect on Earth, because they've grown, they've become different and stronger people. They've developed their own perspectives and their own viewpoints, and as Sasha's been learning these last couple episodes, that's not a bad thing. It's good to have some friends who are more independent. It doesn't mean the bonds between the 3 friends necessarily have to decay. If anything, those bonds might be able to become stronger. I hope at least that the progression of the show will bring our 3 heroines back together, because the show is at its strongest when it's the 3 of them and their different perspectives and their different personalities bouncing off each other. It's conflict, but not in a cheap or contrived way. It's not like they're antagonistic toward each other. They just have different wants and different viewpoints, and that's okay. They're going to have to be honest with each other going forward, which means being honest with themselves and being honest in terms of acknowledging how the others have affected them. In terms of pure emotional storytelling, I think it will be better than Season 2, hopefully, even though it might not be as immediately exciting. These 3 young women care about each other deeply, and they want to help each other, and they want to be in a place where they can reveal their deepest, rawest feelings toward each other, but they're kind of anxious about how the others are going to react. That's really interesting. Anne is back on Earth when we start Season 3. She's with the Plantars, and she has no idea what life is going to be like now. She has a lot of time to really step back and reconsider her friendships with Marcy and Sasha. And again, assuming Marcy comes back, how Anne is going to behave toward Marcy and Sasha going forward is going to be really interesting and introspective. For the first 2 seasons of the show, she has wanted to return to Earth, and now she has, and she's done it with her frog family. This should feel like a triumph for her, but of course it doesn't, because she doesn't know what happened to Sasha, and she believes Marcy is dead. She's left her friendships unresolved. Anne is going to have to return to Amphibia for a couple reasons. The first is to do the obvious work of trying to resurrect Marcy, but the second, and to me the more interesting thing, is her trying to repair her bonds with Marcy and Sasha. Trying to restore those friendships and perhaps make them stronger even than they were before. These 3 characters are going to have to be honest and sincere with each other, and it's going to be quite fascinating to see how that plays out in Season 3. So thank you all for watching. If you liked what you saw today, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Donate to my Patreon if you can and you want to see more videos like this. Keep watching Amphibia. I feel so bad about this crazy True Colors debacle. It has truly been one of the craziest disasters in animation that I can remember in my lifetime. Still, hopefully this whole debacle has convinced a few people who hadn't been paying attention to the show to finally watch it. And I hope people do watch it. Season 2 is amazing, especially its second half, when we are exploring the bonds between these 3 young women. And if the show keeps going in this more character-centric direction, I believe Season 3 will be even better. I can't wait to see it. So anyway, tune in soon for my next analysis. It will be coming soon. That I can promise you. Thank you all again. Adios, comrades.